Welcome back everybody to part 6 of our Unity Space Invader tutorial series. In the last video, we set up a game manager to control game over and wave respawn. However, we have no way to determine when game over takes place. So let's create a lives manager and a score manager for our project. When you're ready, grab your flying saucers, let's crack on. Alright, first let's talk about the head-up display. Back in the score manager, we'll open up the canvas and you can see the inactive game over menu from the previous video. Underneath it, we have our score text. Every time we destroy an alien, each will have different point values that will accumulate in our score. We then have a high score text in the top right. Whatever the highest score value we reach will be saved as our high score, ready for each game session. Then we have our lives manager in the bottom left corner with a small player icon and the text lives. When the player's lives hit 0, that's when we will call upon the game over menu. So let's start with the lives manager. Let's go ahead and create a lives manager script, attach it to the lives manager, and go ahead and open it up. Okay, our lives counter is very simple. All we need are two variables, a public integer lives counter and a public text lives text. As we're using UI, in order to access text, we need to make sure that we've stated that we're using unityengine.ui at the top there. Then in update, our lives text.text will equal a value. Inside these quotations, we've put X, then a space. What value will fill that space? That will be our lives counter. So plus lives counter. And that's it. That's our lives manager done. Let's go ahead to the score manager now. All right. First, at the top of the score manager script, you'll see static score manager scoreman. You can go ahead and delete that. That's something left over from testing. So our variables, similar to before, we're using unityengine.ui. We have a public text score text and high score text. Then underneath, we want the values for those score. Public float score count and high score count. Okay, with the variables done, how are we going to set and get our score? If you've followed any of our previous projects, we're going to use player prefs, a really convenient way to store preferences between gameplay sessions. When we open up the game, we want to be able to first get the values for our score and high score count. In void start, punch in if player prefs.hasKey, then you can name it whatever you like. I've named it high score. Then the high score count will equal the stored value of high score. Player prefs.getFloat high score. And underneath, we'll do the same for score as well. If player prefs.hasKey score, score count equals player prefs.getFloat score. There we go. Okay, as I mentioned, this is getting the score. How do we set and save the score? We will do that in void update. First, let's set our texts. Our score text.text will equal score, then leave a space for the value plus mathf.round score count. Mathf is going to round up the number to the nearest integer. And we'll repeat the same for high score text.text equals top or high, whatever you'd like to name it, space plus mathf.round high score count. Then we will create an if statement. This is how we're going to save the value for our high score. Every time our score surpasses the current high score, then we want to save that value. So in the if statement, we will say if score count is greater than the high score count, then the high score count will equal score count. Then let's set that value in the player prefs. Player prefs.setFloat of the name high score count. And that's how we save the high score. As we're playing the game, we also want to update the score as well. So then underneath, we'll simply say playerprefs.setFloat score count. And there we go. That is setting and getting our scores at the start of the game and updating it during the game. Then lastly, underneath, we will create a public void called addScore. The value we're going to add inside the brackets will be an integer called points_to_add. This value will be determined by the invader. We will move on to that shortly. And inside, all we're going to say is the score count is going to plus equal that points_to_add value. There we go. Let's hit save. And now that we've created the lives and the score manager, let's update our player controller script with information with which to feed the lives manager. So go ahead and open up your player controller script. And let's add some extra variables. Underneath public bool reloading, let's punch in public integer, lives, and default lives. Then, underneath the game manager, let's make a public reference to the lives manager. We'll call that livesman, just like so. Then, in the start method, just like with score manager, we need to get the current value of player lives from player prefs using if playerprefs.hasKey name player lives, then lives equals playerprefs.getInt player lives. Let's not forget, we also want to set the value of player lives in the player prefs. Let's scroll to update. Underneath our if statement for shooting, let's simply punch playerprefs.setInt player lives to the value of lives. Then we'll reference the lives manager, livesman.livesCounter equals lives. So that's going to update our live counter on the UI equal to the current lives the player has. With that set, let's go to the bottom to the void on trigger enter 2D, where if the player is hit by the enemy laser or the invader, we explode and call upon respawn. We only want respawn to happen when we're hit. Otherwise, if we're out of lives, we want to call game over. So inside this if statement, let's punch in another if statement that says if lives is greater than 0, then when we're hit, we will decrease our lives value by 1, lives minus minus, and update the counter likewise, livesman.livesCounter minus minus. Then we will call upon the coroutine respawn. So copy and paste that into there like so. Otherwise, if we are out of lives completely, then we will call upon the game over, else game over, and we'll keep our explosion there like so. All right, hit save and move on to our Invader controller script. Here, you'll see we have the two variables, public int points and the score manager scoreman. In the awake method, let's make a reference to the score manager, scoreman, find object of type score manager. Then all we're going to do is to head down to the void on trigger enter here. When we destroy the alien, we're simply going to say that we want to add points to the score manager.addScore method. And inside there, the points, that'll be the points to give. All right, hit save. Let's now finally go back to the game manager and set these both up in there like so. Let's scroll to the top. You can see that we already have the public score manager scoreman set up from the last video. Make sure you have that ready. Then underneath, you'll see that we have private void on application quit. When we quit the game and reboot it, we always want the player to have the default number of lives. When we quit the game, we can reset that value in player prefs. So we'll say that player prefs.setInteger player lives, player.default lives. So at the moment we quit the game, we've reset the player lives to the default amount. And lastly, let's go all the way to the bottom to game reset. We want to add a few extra things in here. The first, player prefs.setInteger player lives, player default lives, just like we did before. So when we reset the game, we're also making sure we have those default lives. And we also want to reset the player prefs for score back to 0 as well. We'll add player.lives equals 3 and we'll reset the score count back to 0. Hit save. Let's head back into Unity. Okay, once everything has compiled, let's go from the top and set everything up in the inspector. Starting with the game manager. We have our score manager in there like so, that's fine. Let's check the score manager. It's asking for the texts. Drag the score text in there like so. High score in there. We'll leave score count and high score count at 0. They are determined by the value in the player prefs. Lives manager next. Let's drag the lives text like so. Lives counter will equal player lives, so that's fine. Let's check out the player. Asking for the lives manager. Drag that in there like so. As for default lives, I'm going to go with 3. Then let's go to the prefabs folder and give a point value to each of our aliens, starting with the orange one. I'll give him a value of 10. Then we'll do the guys in the middle, the green guys, give them a value of 20. And the purple guys at the back, we'll give them a value of 30. Then let's go back in and do one more thing. If you open up the drop down for the game over menu and see the button of reset, it's asking for a function. We have the reset game function on the game manager. Go ahead and drag that in there like so. Select the necessary function in game manager, and you'll see we have game reset in there like so. Let's hit save and test this out. And now what you should see at the top left, we have a score of 0 and a top score. You might, like here, already have a high score. That will be my score from testing. Please feel free to beat that score to your heart's content. And we also have our lives here as well. So let's shoot some of these aliens and see if the points work. Orange guy for 10 points. Yep, that seems to be working just fine. Let's skip ahead and see what happens when we die. There you go, you can see we've lost a life. We respawn and we're back in. There we go, we can continue racking up a high score. Let's skip forward and see what happens when we have no lives remaining. Okay, with no lives remaining now, the next hit should bring up a game over. Let's see what happens. Hopefully one of these aliens will get me. They'll be close enough to hit, and there we go. We are out of lives. Hit retry, and we're back. Score is back to 0, ready to go again. Our lives set back to the default of 3. And there we go, guys. That's our lives and score manager set up. And we now have a fully functioning Space Invaders project. However, there is one final video left in this series where we're going to create our shields to help support the player and protect Earth, as well as adding a means to quit the game during play. Thank you all very much for watching, guys. I appreciate each and every one of you stopping by. Any questions, please reach out to us on any of our socials at X, Facebook or Instagram, and we will see you in the next video. Take care.